that people find in games and transferring them into other media, right? And I think that is something that shows that there is celebration to be had in video games as well, right? That there is something artistic worth pulling out. And yes, some of you have it. Anyway, so...
Well, to me, watching that, looking at that, reminds me... Okay, so it's from Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest, whatever, the first one.
Yeah, so but all of you were right that said that.
Yes, you all get a cookie.
You all get a cookie that you haven't made yet.
Halfway through the game, you save the princess, and you have to bring her back to the castle. And what happens is, they weren't technically savvy enough to have her sprite follow you, so the hero's sprite just changes, so he's carrying her.
Makes sense to me, right?
All the way back.
Right.
So to me, that evokes feelings when I was a kid playing that game of accomplishment, the Roman triumph, running or walking through the streets with your prize, so to speak.
Right.
And also romance, because after you save her, she's like, "Dost thou love me?" And if you say no, she said, "But thou must. Dost thou love me?"
Yes.
No. Well, but thou must. And then, so that's also kind of a forced...
So it's like real life, in other words.
Yeah,
she's kind of beat you over the head until you marry her. Right?
Basically,
okay,
yeah. So that follows into my adult life as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how the parallels work.
Yeah.
But the point that there are parallels speaks to exactly what I was talking to before, which is that video games speak to something that is involved with our humanity. Just like we can watch a film and be moved to an emotional state that kind of resonates with us, we can do the same thing with video games. And I think that makes a game worth celebrating.
Yes.
All right. So we talked about music. We talked about innovation. And we haven't really talked about gameplay.
Well, it's such a wide
We talked about story. We talked about story. And I think there's a lot more to be fleshed out in story, because story doesn't necessarily mean that someone writes a Hollywood script. Look at a game like Braid.
Yes.
Braid is very heavy on story. It relies very much on that kind of feeling evoked by the story that was written by Jonathan Blow. However, you could have nothing to do with that story at all whatsoever.
No, because the gameplay is innovative enough.
And go through the game, and it's a fun game. That's great. But I think it would be only a great game. I think it would only be a great game and not a good game if you plug into it somehow. Otherwise, it's just a really cool concept in which I could make it in several thousand iterations, right?
Yes.
But what blows us away as we see it for the first time is great concept, game mechanics, that's enmeshed in this beautiful music, in this great setting.
It's a great...
in this wonderful story.
It's an amazing package. It is hipster poppy, as ADD at work has just said. Mark has just said. But no, actually, Psychopather makes a great point, which is what I was about to make, and he stole it from my brain. If you want
That's
more...
not illegal.
Yet. Like on the SOPA pass.
Yeah, in the SOPA pass.
But only if I'm in a foreign country. Remember.
Right. That's correct.
Don't overstate.
That's right.
There's plenty of problems with the bill.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Go to Britain and say that.
That's a foreign country?
I derailed you.
Yes.
Success. I derailed you.
No, what did he say?
The beauty of doing a live
if
show.
you want a video game that takes... this might sound a little harsh, but takes away the gameplay, so you're pretty much only left with the story. You have something like Heavy Rain.
Oh, man, that is harsh. That's harsh.
But...
That's harsh.
True.
No, I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true.
True-ish.
I don't think it's
true.
true.
You got active time events.
Active time events are not if active time events are the only form of gameplay, then you're playing Dragon's Lair. Right?
They've been giving.
Baby.
You also have stuff like Xenosaga. Any game where people say, hey, it's like I'm watching a movie instead of playing
But
the
a
game.
real-time event, Resident Evil 4?
Oh, well, yeah, but those were few and far between.
But you understand what I mean. That's a great gameplay mechanic used in a very good way, enmeshed in a story, which, I'll be honest with you, the Resident Evil story is so played out by this point. It's retarded.
My point...
I just dropped an R-bomb. That's how strongly I feel about it. I dropped an R-bomb.
I wasn't even listening. That's how strongly I feel about it. My point is that Heavy Rain is very, very heavy on story.
It is very heavy on story.
So that is more of an example of a game where...
That's gone the other direction. But I would say Heavy Rain's a great game.
Or hell, L.A. Noire.
All right, but wait a minute. I think what you're really highlighting is that is not necessarily story. What you're highlighting is that it's more cinematic rather than it's heavy on story.
Well, yeah.
Because you can have a game that's very heavy on story.
The focus is the story, is what I mean.
Right, and start yelling for Jason. No, don't. Okay.
What?
Jason!
Oh.
No, don't do that. We can have the show with real-time events. Like, someone press that. Jason! All right. Yeah. So, anyway, but I think... So, video games
Indigo
come
Pops.
about in an era where technology is heightened to the point where people enjoy movies and TV instantaneously, right? Mm-hmm. Both of those art forms evolved over the course of many, many decades. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. Video games look to something else to try to base themselves off of as a means of capturing popular audience. What are they going to model themselves after? They model themselves off the cinema. They model themselves off the television. I'm not saying all of them do it. I'm saying that some of them go toward that kind of a painting.
Right.
Or I'm sorry, that kind of a painting. That kind of a film, right? If I'm clearly trying to draw us back into the art argument, right? Maybe not that far.
Well, so I guess what we're trying to hit here is the story that important?
The story, I think, is very important, but I think it's not. But I think what you're highlighting is the importance of cinematography or the cinematics of a game, which is not necessarily important. I think if you play Half-Life is a very cinematic game, right?
Right.
Even though it has virtually none of it. In fact, there are no cutscenes as far as I know in Half-Life, as I remember.
Yeah.
All there is, it's very cinematic, but it's not like going and watching a movie. It's more about kind of the idea of this story of Gordon Freeman, this narrative, right? Because there is a difference between narrative and cinema, is what I'm getting at.
No,
narrative is a part of cinema. Narrative is a part of video games. Even when you jump into Space Invaders, it's fun to a certain degree because you jump into it and you say, look, here I am. I'm this little thing on this part of the screen, and I get to move. What? You just noticed the whatever the fuck I'm talking
I just did. Yeah. Whoops.
I like that. I think that's funny.
That makes sense.
Anyway, well, I mean, whatever the fuck we're talking about, it kind of works. But anyway.
That was a placeholder title.
Literally just noticed that. I noticed that. I noticed that the first 5 seconds we were broadcasting, but whatever. Anyway, maybe I should say something more. But anyway, so I think you jump in and you see yourself, okay, there is this world, and part of the reason it becomes fun is because you make it into a game that means something. To the same extent that you can make a game out of almost anything, and we do as human beings, we make games out of almost everything you can possibly imagine, right?
Yes.
So my point is, you jump into Space Invaders, there's a kind of implicit story. You jump into even something like Adventure, which tells you virtually nothing, and there is an implicit story. You pull your own sensibilities into what it's presenting to make a kind of art.
So cinematics is not necessarily one of the things that makes a great game great.
I agree with that.
What story is.
I agree.
You know what I think of?
What?
Final Fantasy VI, opera scene.
Yes.
Talk about cinematic without being cinematic.
Absolutely.
That's just telling a great story.
But in reality, that's a memory / real-time event sequence, is it not? And
I hate you.
Well, I'm just saying.
Why you ruin everything.
I know. So the point is, folks, just like criticism can ruin everything, I think we have the potential to do that here as well. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to do that. But I think what's important is that we understand, and one of the things that really kept me going was the idea that we go back and we take a look on Clan of the Grey Wolf, right, at some of the things that make good games great. And we've highlighted so much of those things. And I think we'll continue to highlight those things. But it's important for us to realize, I think, one of the reasons that all of us are here is that there's kind of video games, which most people know and at least tolerate in society. Grandma has her Wii Golf, right? Mm-hmm. And then there are...
I like Wii Golf.
I'm not saying Wii Golf is bad.
There's only 3 holes.
Just like marriage.
Yes.
That is the appropriate response. Actually, no, you didn't give the whole joke, but that's okay. It's right. And then there's the next level of great games. Mm-hmm. Games that kind of change everything. Mm-hmm. And that, as long as those two things exist, I think we're probably in pretty good shape here. Don't you?
Yes.
Because there's always going to be good stuff to celebrate.
Yes. I agree.
You think so?
Especially.
You really do?
I do.
You're not lying.
Well, especially because it's time for the next segment.
You're not just dying to go to the next segment and you want to agree with me. Okay. All right, fine. I'm fine with that.
Well, not that we really have a next segment.
No. And it might fall flat on its face.
Right. I mean, we could just ask each other questions.
Let's just look at the rest of the show.
Why are you a big poopy head?
Right.
Well, that's a long and interesting story.
That is a great story. Actually, I'm a great...
It starts on the shores of the Rappahannock.
Yeah. Starts as I pulled some very bad food out of my freezer.
That is an interesting story.
That is an interesting story, but it's not the one we shall tell today.
Right.
Anyway, good games can be great games. There are very few great games. We should celebrate them. And one of the reasons I thought about this topic, this is just an additional thought before we move on. I saw this book the other day in a store that was like the 1001 video games you must play before you die.
That's a lot.
Okay, that is a lot of games. And I thought, what a great concept. This is a great book. So I start thumbing through it. And I was totally on board until I saw BioShock 2. And I went, fail. How? Because it's separated by decade. And I realized that they had to just fill out every decade.
No.
Right? Yeah. With stuff. And so BioShock 2 is not part of the 1001 games you should play before you die. BioShock absolutely is.
1001 is a lot.
It's a ton of games. That's my point.
I mean, seriously, how can you differentiate between the 1001st and the 1002nd?
Well, there's always going to be that, even if you just did 10. That's not the point. The point is...
Yeah, but it's a little bit easier in the human mind, I think, to organize. These are 10 games I need to play that everyone should play before they die.
Yeah. Or Little Computer People, which I think is actually a great argument. Or just Little Computer People 20, which is, Sims 5 or whatever it is. Anyway, the point is there are games that should... Whether or not they should be distinguished between 1001 and 1002 or 10 and 11. My point is that there are very few great games that you should play before you die that will allow you to understand video gaming, right? It's like if
you mean like if you want to be a great video game maker?
No.
Or if...
Although all great game makers, I think, have an understanding of great games. And if they don't, they're not great game makers. Go talk to someone that makes great games. Mm-hmm. They will tell you a lineage. Now, as much as I hate to say this, right? I was thinking about this in music the other day. Like if you go like someone that wants to be Lady Gaga and has no musical talent, right? And wants to go out there and just start crapping out stuff, but they want to be a music star. They don't understand that Lady Gaga actually has a tremendous understanding of pop music.
She went to Juilliard.
She has a tremendous understanding of the history of music. And if you ask her how her music compares to the Beatles, she will flat out tell you it sucks.
Sure.
She will tell you that.
That's why she tries to emulate Madonna, not the Beatles.
But you understand but Madonna would say the same thing.
What, that sucks?
No, I wouldn't say that. She would say that her music in retro. This is totally derailed. We're not even talking about music. My point
now,
is,
Rebecca Black.
I tried to make a great allusion to my wonderful breadth of knowledge in music, and it just fell apart. The point is that I think if someone were to go, if someone were to come from a different planet that had never played any video games, and what a sad planet that would be, I would argue. If we were to go and if someone from another planet came down and sat down and said, "Hey, teach me about video gaming and show me the best,"
teach me how to love,
right? And you had to show them in 10 games. You could show them, I think, the great history of video games and all the kind of great feelings you can get from video games in 10 games.
Yeah, sure, why not?
That means we should be celebrating the best of the best, and not necessarily that. So when people go up and say, "Oh, video games are art," they're making the wrong argument, because that's like saying that television is art. There's some television that's very artistic, and some television that's just awful.
And there's some art that is pretty crappy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But I mean,
there's some art.
Do you mean
that's
painting?
Not art. I mean, yes.
Do you mean painting? Yeah, there's some painting that's terrible.
You gotta get all specific.
No, I'm just kidding. That's a great painting. It is. It's a great painting. I love that idea. I love the idea. The concept is great.
You should have seen the big one he had for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles too.
Stroke limit.
That would be a great painting.
Yeah. We're getting the stroke limit sign. All right, so we definitely need to move on to the next segment. So I think we've wrapped up both of those things pretty well. That was a good little snapshot of two very, very difficult to tackle topics. Don't you agree with that?
Yes, and we did it, kind of. We
stumbled through it.
We tried it.
I'll save you, Gibby. That's our out. Stroke limit. All right, good. So let's go. It's time
for
the next segment.
All right, your questions.
We're warmed up.
Yes.
Now, theoretically, we did the warming up. We should have done an hour before the show started.
Yes.
We've now done that, and we're ready.
So don't inundate the chat with your questions. Send us a private message in the chat with your questions or topics you'd like us to touch on. It can be anything. COTGW in the chat. Let us know. So like I said before, we're looking to integrate a Skype calling system.
Yes.
So we can almost be like a radio show, and you can actually join and talk a little bit. But we're not. We're taking baby steps before we're crawling before we can walk here.
Right.
So etc. Anything interesting happened to you lately? Any corn dog related interesting things?
No, not at all. Not at all. I feel wonderful.
Good.
And life is grand. So at this point, have we received any private messages?